just want to remind you that the 80% of people who come to a congregation for the first time have come because somebody suggested they come. So remember, we've got these business cards out on the credenza and over in the fellowship hall. Make sure you have a couple in your wallet, and whenever you're having a conversation that seems appropriate, just suggest people check us out here at Unity of Tampa. Also want to thank the people who showed up for Gardening Day. Once a month we have a gardening day to just kind of keep the courtyard and the grounds looking nice. Yesterday was the one for this month. So we had, let's see, there was Logan, of course, was here. And then we had Candace Graham, Gail Gibson, Michael Massey, and me. We were out here yesterday. So hope you'll join us for the next one. So, good morning. A couple bought this new house. And the wife was in the kitchen looking out her window, and she could see into the neighbor's yard, and she saw the neighbor hanging up laundry. And she was putting up sheets, and the wife was looking at it and said, "Oh my God, look at those sheets. I mean, there's spots and stuff all over them. I wonder what the deal is." She goes, "Well, I'm not going to say anything until I get to know them better." Following week, same thing. She's looking at the people putting out the laundry, and she's putting up the sheets. She sees these spots. She's like, "Oh boy, I don't know if she just got a lousy laundry detergent, or maybe she can't afford to buy new sheets. I don't know." Third week comes, she sees this amazing transformation. Suddenly, the sheets are white and the laundry's brighter than ever. And she says to her husband, "Oh, look at that. I mean, she finally got the clue." Or maybe somebody talked to her. And her husband, sitting at the kitchen table, said, "Or it could be that I washed the windows this week." In the Gospel of Matthew, 7th chapter, 5th verse, Jesus says, "First take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." And so often, what we're looking at, we don't quite understand. So our minds go to work making meaning out of whatever it is that we're seeing before us. And we look at our past experiences, and we filter through those and try to come up with some meaning so we can have some sense of normalcy. We decide what something means. I'm going to have Duncan put up a slide. For September and October, our theme is Fearless Living. And I've invited you to read the book, Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict and Creating Peace. We're reading it through together. This week I'm going to talk about some of the material that's in Chapter 7. Next week we're going to jump ahead to Chapter 9 and then come back to Chapter 8 the week after that. But each week has had an affirmative prayer. So for a quick review, first week was nothing and nobody is against me. The universe fully supports me in being all I am created to be. Second week was I embrace conflict with ease, being open to each new opportunity to stretch and grow my spiritual awareness. Third week was I release judgments about myself and others. Fourth week is I release the illusion of separation and I relax into the bliss of divine communion. Later, we'll be doing the fifth week. It's, of course, printed in your bulletin, so you can work with it this week. But we also started a 21-day journaling a reconciliation process. And if you missed that or didn't get the study guide, both of those are out there on the credenza. The reconciliation process is just 4 questions to ask yourself at the end of the day and just kind of write down your answers, being willing to see if we can move past misperception, which, of course, is our theme today. Now, if you're having difficulty embracing these concepts, or they just don't seem right, I'm just asking you to be willing to just work with me on this. Like I said, this is a 7-week series. And my intention is for each of us to figure out how to communicate in a healthy way, how to see if there's a disagreement or a conflict, that we're willing to just talk it through a little bit more. Because a lot of times we're arguing about something up here, but what's really going on is there's this unmet need in each of us down here. And if we're willing to move past that physical appearance and find out what that underlying need is, and a lot of times it's just someone feels unworthy or unloved, and they're looking for some way to have another person express that to them. So, if we're willing to look past the misperception. Now, I'm going to have Duncan put up the next. Oh, that's right. That's what I was going to say. That each of us as individuals, healthy communication. And then, of course, as a community, we're going to get together in 3 weeks on Saturday, October 27th, so that as a community unit of Tampa, we can finally unload the baggage of our history. Here we are coming up on the 90th anniversary. And one of the important cogs, especially with the transition, this congregation has gone through over the last 4 years. It's important that we all kind of get together, just compare notes, dig a little deeper, and then we can unload the baggage that's kind of been weighing us down here since I started at the beginning of the year. And then, of course, as a nation, if we can learn to communicate better, I think it's going to be a lot healthier. And as a world, imagine if everybody got that they don't need to be more spiritual, they're already a spiritual being having a human experience. That would be the remedy for our world, and then we can move through these labor pains that we're all expressing as we birth a new earth. Okay, so Duncan, yeah, up now, 2 weeks ago we talked about the 4 winds of conflict from chapter 5. Actually, I guess it was last week, yeah. So the 4 winds of conflict, and these are things that are going on within us that usually cause the conflict or the disagreement. So the underlying thoughts that create this. So there's separation, misperception, competition, and defensiveness. These are all things that can stand in the way of us having a deeper understanding and see any situation in our life being there as an opportunity for spiritual growth. So last week we talked about the antidote to separation, and that is communion. The willingness to set aside appearances and see that, yes, we're connected. We're one. But we're also one and connected with God at all times. So if we're feeling unconnected in any way, it's us that's stepped away. So let's find the antidote for misperception. And we're going to start by looking at some optical illusions. I'm going to have Duncan put up the slide there. I've got my handy little laser pointer, if I can get it out of the bottom of my pocket. Of course, there's an old classic, what do you see? The black looks like a vase, but then you see the profile of two people looking at each other. And it's interesting because when you focus on one, the other one kind of dissolves, then you go back to the other. So Duncan, go ahead and put up the next one here. This one, it's a little darker than I really wanted it to be, but so you've got the tree there, and of course the golden sky behind it. Looks very nice, but does anybody see anything else? Down here in the lower part, there is what looks like a fetus a human fetus in a womb. You can kind of see the forehead and the eyes, the nose. Here's the arms, and then over here, the feet sticking up, and then of course the back. So you don't see it at first until you just have an opportunity to have somebody point it out, or just it suddenly jumps forward. Okay, Duncan, show them the next one. Now it looks like a man's face, kind of, but something else is going on here. And as you see, this is actually a collection of animals from around the world. You see, the forehead is actually an elephant. And then this eyebrow here is a dolphin. This one's like an alligator. You got a cockatoo parrot. And then, of course, down here it looks like a white baby seal here. And then there's a whale here. So, again, first appearances, it's like, okay, but let's look a little deeper. And obviously, you can do an internet search on optical illusions, and you can find a lot of this stuff online. Okay, Duncan, show us the next slide. Now, a lot of you know that I grew up in Chicago. And this was a big mystery in Chicago. In the 1960s, early 1960s, of course, the economy was humming along, and Chicago and Cook County shared this big office building, but they were running out of space, so they had to build a new building. It was called the Civic Center at the time, and then after Mayor Richard J. Daley, the father died, they named the building after him. But they actually had Picasso come up with a sculpture for the plaza out in front of it. Picasso didn't really do commissions, but he agreed to go ahead and do something special for Chicago, and this was it. What is it? And as you see, it's actually 50 feet tall. You can see the people here and the kids playing on the base of it. And so there was a lot of just questions about what it is and a lot of speculation about what it could be. And it wasn't until 25 years later, of course, this was unveiled in 1967. The building was built in 1965. Okay, Duncan, show us the next slide. In 1992, an expert on Pablo Picasso wrote a letter to the editor of the Chicago Sun-Times on the 25th anniversary of its unveiling to say what he believed it was. He says, Pablo Picasso in that time in the mid-60s was really into Don Quixote. So with Don Quixote, of course, the mythical, or I should say literary figure from the 1600s, one of the first great novels. So yeah, Don Quixote is portrayed as having the Spanish helmet, and then of course the big collar. And this was a sketch that about that same time Picasso did of Don Quixote. So what he said was that Pablo also liked to mess with people's minds. And he had a feeling that if he made this sculpture for Chicago, we wouldn't get it. But if you're willing to walk from the front of the sculpture to one of the corners of the building, either the southwest corner or the southeast corner, you see Don Quixote's profile. You see the nose, the mouth, and then of course the helmet like you see over here, and the collar sticks out, and there's even a little from the front of the sculpture, his little tuft of hair on his chin. So it's just a matter, and then of course you kind of see the mirror image if you go to the other corner of the building, but it's just a matter of taking a different perspective. It's like, I don't get what this thing is. And then suddenly you're like, ah, clever. So have you had that happen in your life where you're in a mess and you're willing to dig a little deeper? God, show me the good in this. And you find yourself saying, clever. Okay, so misperception. Misperception, the antidote to misperception is applying spiritual principle. Now, if we look at Unity's spiritual principles, we see there are like two main umbrellas. There's like the umbrella of faith-based principles and then love-based principles. So if we're to take something that comes into our life, a situation, an annoying person, whatever it is, and we're willing to say, God, show me the good in this, we can drop all of the filters that we've used. And like I said, so much as this is just getting to the edge of our knowledge field and saying, I haven't got a clue on what to do next. God, show me. And then through our thoughts, through our intuition, we get our divine guidance. And simply, but of course, if we're perceiving an adversary, that's a good clue that we're having a misperception, because remember, week 1 is nobody or nothing is against you. So, applying principle. Faith allows us to see the presence of God in the situation. God, show me the good in this. And love allows us to feel that oneness with God in the situation. And being willing to, instead of coming up with a counterpoint, say, tell me more. Talk to me a little bit about this. Perhaps I'm missing some facts, or perhaps I'm missing some information. Or perhaps, like I said, rather than arguing about a problem up here, there's a deeper need down here that we're trying to fulfill for each other. Because I believe that we are here on this earth to bring out the best in each other. There are gaps in our awareness, and that's what supports things like fear and mistrust. Jesus, in talking to his 12 disciples in the Gospel of Matthew, 16th chapter, 19th verse, he's talking to Peter. Now, Peter of the 12 disciples represents faith. So each of us have that apostle, that faith within us. And Jesus says, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now, remember, this is all symbolism stuff. So the kingdom of God, in the kingdom of heaven, there are all of these mentions of this in the Gospels, especially like in Matthew. Kingdom of God is that absolute realm. God is always there, always, never changes. Everything's cool. But then the kingdom of heaven is a relative sphere that we experience here as spiritual beings in a human experience. So over here is our growing spiritual awareness that we are having a human experience. So here Jesus says, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, meaning you'll allow that spiritual awareness to continue to grow. So whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. So if you do bind your perceptions here on earth, it's going to be limiting what can happen in heaven for you. But then he says, what you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So if you're willing to let go, to get out of those old experiences, those old filters, and say, okay, I'm willing to look at this from a different angle, or I'm willing to get more information. Quantum physics tells us that everything is vibrating molecules, and that those molecules can be affected by our thoughts and our words, our voices. So, there are infinite possibilities in any situation. But once we, with our mind, come up with a conclusion and focus on something, it manifests, it demonstrates. Suddenly those infinite possibilities all drop away because we have decided what this means. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to ignore our experiences or our intuition. Those are all important guideposts for us in this process. But carpenters always have two tools with them. One is called a square, and the other one is the level with the bubble. This allows them to see, what is this building on solid foundation? Is it standing in the right way? my dad was an iron worker and a firefighter, and actually he was part of the crew that built that building behind the Picasso, and he was working on a building in Niles, Illinois. And they were working with, squares and levels, and he said it was a good thing because just down the street, this developer had decided to cover his standpipe with a replica of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He said, as you're looking down the street, if you're trying to figure out what's up and down, that would be thrown off because you're looking at the Tower of Pisa behind his building. Here's another example. Like, okay, so you pull out your wallet, you look at how much money you've got. So let's say you've got $72. Is $72 abundance or is it lack? Is it more than enough or is it not enough? Kind of depends upon our perspective. Also can depend upon what we're going to do the rest of the day. If you're going out to lunch, I think you're well covered. If you're going out to buy a car, you're going to need a little bit more than $72, at least for something that runs. So, and of course, how much you're going to put in the offering afterwards. Realize that principle and defensiveness is us making a meaning out of something that's happened. So, the antidote for misperception is spiritual principle, the willingness to apply our faith and our love. Faith allowing us to see the presence of God in the situation, and love feeling our oneness with God in the situation. Okay, Duncan, go ahead and put up the affirmative prayer for this week. And like I said, this is in your bulletin. I encourage you to work with this week. And like I said, pick up the handouts if you missed those. Affirmative prayer is I see through clear eyes of love and faith and find God present in every circumstance. So let's say that together. I see through clear eyes of love and faith and find God present in every circumstance. And the next slide, this week's takeaways. So, last week was separation. We need to have communion as the antidote. This week, the antidote for misperception is spiritual principle. We start by getting centered, going back to that eye of the storm. There may be a storm swirling around us, but we're in a nice calm eye in the center where we can focus on the good in the situation. We apply our faith. We see the presence of God in the person or the situation. And then we apply our love, and we feel our oneness with God and our oneness with the situation or the person in front of us. But then we bring in another one of our apostles, understanding. And of course, doubting Thomas, was understanding. So understand the divine guidance that comes, whether it's through intuition, through thoughts. We are guided as to what to do next. Or sometimes we're guided on what not to do next. In the letter to the Philippians that I touched on earlier, 4th chapter, 8th verse, Paul wrote, "And finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." Whatever we focus on is going to expand. So if we focus on abundance or enough, or more than enough, that's going to expand in our world. But if we focus on lack or there's not enough, that's what we're going to see more of in our life. Our closing story is about a woman who changed her perspective and changed her life.